starting in the Premier League and starting with the title race, of course. Very simply, who wins, but also the historical significance of Arsenal potentially getting this title and the implications that has the potential developments at Manchester United in terms of the sale, what Newcastle are doing. This league could look very different in a season or two. And so this is a golden opportunity for Arsenal to get this trophy and to get themselves a title. They're 8 points up with an extra game played. This is by no means over, but they're in a really good position. They navigated what they needed to, and Manchester City could not capitalize on that bad stretch they had. I've kind of given my thoughts about this Arsenal team and about Mikel Arteta. I'm not going to go too deep into that. This is Arsenal's to lose. Can they? And they stumbled. Everybody kind of wondered if they were going to throw it away, and they responded big time, as they have all season. I expect that to continue, but they also have not faced this kind of pressure. It's one thing to have it in, February, March. It's another, as they learned last season, when you just don't have time to make up for the mistakes that you make, for the points that you drop. What does this look like at the end of April and in May, those final weeks of the season when titles get decided? Perhaps, one of the more interesting things for the Premier League, from my perspective, is going to be this top four battle. Obviously, it's a big storyline everywhere because of the consequences of reaching the Champions League. But specifically in the Premier League, okay, Spurs are in fourth. They have a 2-point cushion. Newcastle are actually fourth in points per game, which is something that doesn't get discussed enough. It annoys me most of the time when we kind of go, right, so Spurs are in fourth because they've played 2 extra games. Points per game actually indicates, and of course, you got to put the points on the board, but it's not like this is games in hand where you're just assuming teams are going to win. Newcastle are on pace right now to collect more points than Spurs. That matters to me. So I always look at points per game. And then the other factor here is that Brighton actually have a higher maximum point total than Spurs. The problem is they need to earn those points because those points currently are in the form of games in hand. So if they don't capture all of those points, we're having a little bit of a different conversation. But I've had Brighton really high in my top 25, and they're staying there because they are in the thick of this race. And Newcastle went that really long stretch without being able to win. Brighton have just been consistently really good. And we're going to have to see whether they can make these games up because they've always kind of just been behind everybody. And also Liverpool are only 7 points back with 2 games in hand. Still, somehow, some way. Every time you just kind of write them off, they find a way to hang in there. And I've talked about this before, this idea that this is not Liverpool clawing their way back into the race as much as it is people just leaving the door open for them to walk through because nobody is claiming fourth. What does this look like the rest of the season? Should be absolutely fascinating. And then you got the most compelling part of all, which is the relegation battle. There are 4 points now separating 12th and 20th place, which is ridiculous. And it's why you see Crystal Palace make a managerial change and bring back Roy Hodgson. It's not that Palace are having a bad season. It's that Palace, despite where they are on the table, are understandably worried they were going to get relegated with the rate they were going. And to a certain extent, they just moved backward by going, and I didn't get really a chance to talk about the Vieira sacking, so I'll spend a couple seconds here. To have one of the best seasons in club history, and to allow Vieira to kind of overhaul that team and completely redefine what Crystal Palace's squad looked like, and then fire him, after reportedly they were considering doing it way earlier. To bring back Roy Hodgkin, I get why, because you got to avoid relegation, and they were awful in attack. Those last few games under Vieira. But it's just such a huge step backward to go back where you were before all of the good work that Vieira did. Because this is not the same team that Hodgkin had during that last stint. This is a team that was supposed to be built for the future. This is an incredibly young team. One that I would argue you should be okay taking your lumps within the championship if it comes to that. But the money says otherwise, so Roy Hodgkin is back. On that same note, I brought this up before too, I think. Do we get another managerial change? I'm looking at you, Brendan Rodgers. I'm looking at you, David Moyes, in particular. Does anybody get freaked if we get a couple more weeks into this thing and one of those teams is still in the relegation zone? Because part of what's so fascinating about this is not just the amount of teams involved, but the names. West Ham, Leicester, Everton. You get the point. This is a truly special relegation battle that is going to be captivating until the very end.